The dawn came slowly to Redstone Creek Ranch, painting the San Juan Basin in shades of gray and gold. September 1885. The high desert breathed with that peculiar silence only vast emptiness can hold. A silence that pressed against a man's chest and reminded him how small he was beneath the endless sky. Levi Brennan woke at 5 in the morning, same as every day for the past 2 years. But he didn't wake to the rooster's crow or the breaking light. He woke to the sound of his son crying in the next room. The boy's sobs came through the thin pine wall, muffled but unmistakable. 7 years old, and Samuel still woke most nights with nightmares he couldn't or wouldn't explain. Levi sat up, his bare feet finding the cold wooden floor. The room held the chill of high-altitude mornings, that bite that got into a man's bones and stayed there. On the small table beside his bed sat a photograph in a wooden frame. Emily, his wife. Her hand rested on her rounded belly, 8 months pregnant. Her smile caught in that moment of hope before everything shattered. 2 years. 2 years since he had lost both her and the baby she carried. 2 years of waking to his son's tears and his own crushing guilt. He pulled on his boots, laced them with practiced motions, and walked to Samuel's room. The door creaked when he pushed it open. The boy lay curled under a patchwork quilt, his small face wet with tears, his breathing uneven. Levi sat on the edge of the narrow bed. The frame groaned under his weight. He was a big man, 6'1", with shoulders broadened by years of ranch work. His hands, when he reached out to touch his son's shoulder, were rough and calloused, the hands of a man who built and fixed and struggled against the hard earth. "Bad dream again, son?" Samuel nodded but didn't speak. The boy had grown quieter after Emily died, as if he feared that words might make the last person he had left disappear too. As if silence was safer than risking another loss. Levi gathered the child into his arms, feeling the small body tremble. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." But even as he said it, he wondered if being here was enough. Samuel needed more than a father drowning in his own grief. The boy needed laughter. He needed warmth. He needed what Levi couldn't seem to give him anymore. They sat like that until the trembling stopped, until Samuel's breathing steadied. Then Levi carried him downstairs to the kitchen, where he'd learned to make breakfast through trial and painful error. Eggs that were sometimes too hard. Coffee that was always too bitter. Bread from the store in Mesa Ridge because his attempts at baking ended in charred failure. The kitchen still smelled like Emily sometimes, or maybe that was just his imagination, clinging to ghosts. The house was small but solid, built by his father Thomas Brennan 30 years ago, when this land was even wilder than it was now. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a main room below, with the kitchen and a stone fireplace. Simple, honest, everything his father had been. Outside the window, the land stretched away in rolling waves of sunu and scrub grass. 160 acres that his father had claimed and tamed and left to him. The creek ran through it, Redstone Creek, named for the rust-colored stones that lined its bed. That water was life here. That water was why he could raise cattle and horses. That water was why men like Marcus Dalton wanted this land. But Levi tried not to think about Marcus Dalton. Not yet, not this early in the day when he was still gathering the strength to face another sunrise. He cracked eggs into a pan, watched them sizzle in bacon grease. Samuel sat at the table, quiet, picking at a piece of bread. The silence between them was familiar now, comfortable and terrible all at once. "Pa," Samuel said suddenly, his voice small, "is the lady coming in today?" Levi's hand stilled on the pan handle. The lady, Catherine Whitmore. The woman Silas Hawthorne had arranged through some marriage agency back east. The woman Levi had been exchanging letters with for 6 months, though every word he wrote felt like a betrayal of Emily's memory. "Yes," Levi said. "This afternoon, 4 o'clock, Silas said." "What's she like?" Levi didn't know how to answer that. What was she like? He knew her handwriting, neat and careful. He knew she came from a merchant family. He knew she played piano and spoke French and liked to read. But he didn't know the shape of her laugh or the way she moved through a room or whether she'd look at his broken family and see something worth staying for. "I guess we'll find out together," he said finally. After breakfast, they went out to tend the animals. The September sun climbed higher, burning off the chill. The sky stretched overhead in that impossible western blue that seemed to go on forever. Levi showed Samuel how to brush down the horses, how to check their hooves for stones, how to read the signs of sickness or injury. Your grandfather taught me this, Levi said, his hands moving over the mare's coat, just like his father taught him. One day you'll teach your own son. That's how it works. That's how a man leaves something behind that matters. Samuel listened, his young face serious, absorbing the words. These were the moments when the bay seemed most alive, when Levi was teaching him something real, something that connected past to future. From the ridge road came the sound of hooves. Levi looked up to see Silas Hawthorne riding toward them, his old gray mare picking her way down the rocky path. Silas was 64, silver-bearded, but he still sat a horse like he had during his years in the Union Army. Straight-backed, alert. He reined up by the corral fence and dismounted with a slight wince. His joints weren't what they used to be, but he never complained. That wasn't Silas's way. Morning, Levi. Samuel. He touched the brim of his hat. Then he pulled an envelope from his saddlebag. Got a telegram from the stage depot. Miss Whitmore's carriage will be here by 4. Levi took the envelope but didn't open it. The paper felt heavy in his hand, final somehow. You having second thoughts? Silas asked quietly. I've been having second thoughts since you signed me up for this without asking. Silas smiled, but there was sympathy in his weathered face. You need someone, Levi. Samuel needs someone. I know it feels like moving on is betraying her memory, but Emily wouldn't want you to stop living. She'd want you to give that boy a mother. She'd want you to find a reason to smile again. Levi looked away, his jaw tight. Silas was probably right. Emily had been practical and loving in equal measure. She wouldn't want them frozen in grief, but knowing what she'd want and being able to do it were different things entirely. What if she takes one look at us and gets back on that carriage? Levi said. Then she's a fool, Silas replied. But I don't think she will. Her letters seem genuine. Seems like she's looking for the same thing you are. A second chance. After Silas left, Levi found himself unable to focus on work. He fixed a fence that didn't need fixing. He reorganized the tool shed. He did anything to keep his hands busy and his mind from spinning in circles. At noon, he made Samuel wash up and put on clean clothes. Then he did the same, pulling out the only suit he owned, the suit he'd worn to marry Emily. It still fit, though the fabric smelled of cedar from the trunk where it had been stored. He looked at himself in the small mirror above the wash basin. 30 years old, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 2 years ago. A hardness in his expression that he didn't recognize. You look nice, Pa, Samuel said from the doorway. Thank you, son. You too. They went downstairs and waited. The clock on the mantel ticked. The afternoon sunlight slanted through the windows. Levi felt his palms sweat. He wiped them on his trousers, felt foolish, wiped them again. At 10 minutes to 4, he heard it. The rattle of wheels on the hard-packed road. The sound of horses. He stepped out onto the porch, Samuel close beside him, the boy's small hand gripping his. The carriage appeared through a cloud of red dust, backlit by the lowering sun. The light stretched long across the basin, turning everything golden and dreamlike. Levi's heart hammered in his chest. 6 months of letters. 6 months of careful words and cautious hope. All of it coming down to this moment. The carriage rolled to a stop. The driver, a weathered man in a dusty coat, climbed down and opened the door. Levi held his breath. A woman stepped out, and Levi's entire world tilted. She wasn't what he expected. Nothing about her matched the image he'd constructed from those careful letters. Her hair was black, not the fair blonde he'd imagined. It fell past her shoulders in a thick braid, catching the sunset light. Her skin was brown, sun-darkened, and beautiful. She wore a simple blue dress, worn at the hem, and beneath it, dusty leather boots that had seen hard miles. Her eyes, when they met his, were dark and deep. There was something in them that looked like it had seen too much and survived anyway. Strength and sorrow mixed together. She stepped down from the carriage with quiet certainty. Her movements were sure, grounded, nothing timid or hesitant about her. She carried a single cloth bag, everything she owned condensed to what she could hold in one hand. The driver placed the bag at her feet and climbed back onto his perch without a word. The carriage rolled away, leaving her standing there in the dust and the dying light. Levi couldn't speak. His throat had closed. This wasn't Catherine Whitmore. This woman was Apache. He could see it in her features. in the way she stood, in everything about her. Samuel's hand tightened in his. The woman looked at Levi for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice soft but clear as water over stone. "It's not a mistake. I'm yours." The wind stilled. The world narrowed to just her words hanging in the air between them. Levi forgot how to breathe. Nothing about his life felt familiar anymore. "I'm sorry," he managed finally. "Who are you?" "Naira Silverthorne," she said. "Catherine Whitmore couldn't come." The words landed like stones. Catherine couldn't come. 6 months of letters. 6 months of building toward this day. And she couldn't come. Instead, she'd sent this stranger. This Apache woman whose eyes held secrets he couldn't begin to guess. "I don't understand," Levi said. "I know." Naira's gaze didn't waver. "Can we talk inside? Or would you rather I leave now and save us both the trouble?" There was no bitterness in her tone, just simple fact. She was giving him the choice. She expected rejection. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself ready to turn and walk away. Levi looked down at Samuel. The boy was staring at Naira with wide eyes. Not fear exactly, something else. Curiosity, maybe? Or recognition of something Levi couldn't see. "Come inside," Levi heard himself say. "Please?" Naira picked up her bag and followed them into the house. Her footsteps were quiet on the wooden porch. She paused at the threshold, as if stepping into someone else's home required courage she had to gather first. Inside, she looked around the main room with careful attention. The stone fireplace, the simple furniture, the photograph of Emily on the mantel. Her gaze lingered there for a moment, and something softened in her expression. Understanding, maybe, or shared grief. "Sit," Levi said, gesturing to the table. His voice came out rougher than he intended. Naira sat. Samuel climbed into the chair beside his father, never taking his eyes off this unexpected stranger. Levi didn't know where to start, so he started with the simplest question. "Why did you come here?" Naira folded her hands on the table. Her fingers were long and capable, marked with small scars. The hands of someone who worked, who built things, who survived. "Because there was nowhere else left," she said simply, "and because your name was spoken to me with kindness, and I needed to know if such a man existed." "Catherine spoke my name." "Yes, we met 2 months ago. She was running from her father, a merchant in Santa Fe named William Whitmore, a wealthy man, a violent man." Naira's voice stayed level, but Levi heard the edge beneath it. "He beat her after her mother died, wanted to control who she married, who she spoke to, every moment of her life. She wrote to you as an escape, but when the time came, she realized if she came here, he'd find her. He'd hurt you and your son to get to her." Levi felt cold spread through his chest. "So she ran. To Colorado. She has distant cousins there who can protect her. She asked me to come in her place, to make sure you didn't think she'd abandoned you without reason. And you agreed? To come here to a stranger's home?" Naira met his eyes. "I told you, there was nowhere else. I've been moving from town to town for 4 years, ever since my tribe was scattered, ever since I lost everyone I loved. Catherine offered me a chance to stop moving, even if only for a night." Samuel spoke suddenly, his young voice breaking the tension. "You lost your family too." Naira looked at the boy, her expression gentled. "Yes, I lost them all." "Like we lost Mama," Samuel whispered. "Yes, like that." Something passed between them in that moment, some understanding that existed outside words. Levi watched his son reach across the table and touch Naira's hand. Just for a second. Then Samuel pulled back, shy again. Levi cleared his throat. "You can stay. Tonight at least. The guest room is upstairs. It's small, but it's clean." "Thank you." Naira stood. "I'll work for my keep. I don't take charity." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do." Her tone was firm, but not unkind. "It's how I stay human, how I keep my dignity, by working, by being useful." Levi nodded slowly. He understood that. He understood it better than she probably knew. That evening, he showed her the room upstairs. It was small, as he'd said. A narrow bed, a table, a chair. The window looked out over the creek and the old wooden bridge that crossed it. Naira set her bag on the bed and turned to face him. "I'll leave in the morning if you want," she said. "I know this isn't what you expected." No, Levi admitted, it's not. I'm sorry. Don't be. It's not your fault. He paused in the doorway. Did Catherine write me a letter to explain? Naira reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. The paper was fine quality, the handwriting elegant. She handed it to him. Thank you, Levi said. He went downstairs but didn't open the letter right away. Instead, he sat on the porch and watched the last light fade from the sky. The desert night came on fast, stars appearing one by one until the darkness overhead blazed with them. Finally, he opened the envelope. Catherine's letter was brief but honest. She explained about her father's violence, about her fear that coming to New Mexico would endanger Levi and Samuel, about her decision to flee to Colorado instead. And then at the end, Naira Silverthorne is a good woman, Levi. Stronger than I am, braver. She's lost everything but hasn't let it break her. I told her about you because I wanted her to know that good men still exist. Please give her a chance. She needs a place to belong more than anyone I've ever met. Levi folded the letter and slipped it back into his pocket. Inside the house, he could hear Naira moving around in her room. Quiet footsteps, the creak of the bed frame as she sat down. Tomorrow, he'd have to figure out what to do. Tomorrow, he'd have to make decisions. But tonight, he was too tired, too overwhelmed by the strangeness of having someone else under his roof again. Someone who wasn't Emily. Someone who brought her own sorrows and secrets. He went inside, checked on Samuel, who was already asleep, then climbed into his own bed. Sleep was a long time coming. When it finally arrived, it brought dreams of Emily and burning bridges and dark eyes that held both questions and answers he couldn't name. Morning came with the smell of coffee. Levi woke confused for a moment, then remembered. Naira. He pulled on his clothes and went downstairs to find her already in the kitchen. She'd found the coffee, the pot, had figured out the stove. She stood with her back to him, steam rising from the cup in her hands. You didn't have to, Levi said. She turned. I told you, I work for what I receive. They drank coffee in silence. It was better than what Levi usually made. Stronger, more carefully prepared. When Samuel came down, Naira had eggs and bread waiting. The boy ate with more appetite than Levi had seen in weeks. After breakfast, Naira asked, Can I see the land? If I'm borrowing even a night from you, I need to know what kind of place this is. Levi agreed. The three of them walked out into the morning. The September air was cool, not yet touched by the day's heat. Naira observed everything with careful attention. The way the fields were laid out, the condition of the fences, the animals in the corral. She knelt once, scooped up a handful of soil, smelled it. Good earth, she said. You could grow more than you do. Vegetables, herbs. I focus on the livestock, Levi said. You should grow food too. Your son needs vegetables. Meat alone isn't enough to keep a child strong. Samuel looked up hopefully. Can we grow a garden? Levi glanced at Naira, then back at his son. Maybe, if Miss Silverthorne wants to teach you. I can teach him, Naira said, if you'll allow it. They walked further, following the creek upstream. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the air. Grasshoppers leaped from the scrub. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. Then they came to the bridge. The old wooden bridge that crossed Redstone Creek at its narrowest point. The structure his father had built 20 years ago. It was showing its age now. Some of the planks were warped. The rope railings were frayed in places. One corner sagged slightly where the supporting beam had weakened. Levi stepped onto it first, testing each board with his weight. The wood groaned but held. Watch where I step, he told Samuel. The boy followed, placing his small feet carefully. But Naira didn't move. She stood at the edge of the bridge, her breathing suddenly quick and shallow. Her hands trembled. Levi looked back. You all right? She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the water below. The recent rains had swollen the creek. It ran fast and brown, churning around the stones. Miss Silverthorne? I'm fine, she said, but her voice was tight. You don't have to cross. Yes, I do. She took a step onto the bridge, then another. Her hand gripped the rope railing so hard her knuckles went pale. Levi understood then. Something about water, something about bridges, some trauma she carried that this moment was forcing her to face. He moved back toward her. Take your time. No, Ying. She forced another step. I need to do this. They made it halfway across together. Levi close enough to catch her if she faltered. Samuel ahead, waiting patiently. The bridge swayed slightly in the wind. The creek rushed beneath them, loud and relentless. Then it happened. A sharp crack split the air. One of the planks gave way beneath Naira's weight. She dropped, her knees slamming into the remaining boards. Her hand slipped on the rope. For one terrible moment, she was falling. Levi moved without thinking. His arm shot out, wrapped around her waist, pulled her against him. His other hand gripped the support beam. The bridge lurched, but it held. They stood locked together, her heart hammering against his chest, her breath coming in gasps. "Don't look down," Levi said, his voice low and steady. "Just look at me." She raised her eyes to his. They were full of terror, but also something else. Trust. She was trusting him in this moment, even though she barely knew him. "I've got you," he said. "I'm not letting go." Slowly, carefully, he guided her the rest of the way across, each step deliberate, each movement tested before he let her put weight on it. When they finally reached the far bank, Naira's knees gave out. She sank to the ground, her whole body shaking. Levi knelt beside her. Samuel came running over, his face worried. "Is she okay, Pa?" "She will be," Levi said. "Just give her a minute." Naira pressed her hands to her face, forcing her breathing to slow. When she finally looked up, her eyes were wet, but her voice was steady. "You saved me." "You weren't falling," Levi said. "You just needed someone to steady you." "No," and she shook her head. "You saved me, not just now, when you let me stay, when you didn't turn me away." Levi didn't know what to say to that, so he just offered his hand. She took it, and he helped her to her feet. They stood there for a moment, the three of them, the broken bridge behind them and the open land ahead. Samuel moved closer to Naira and slipped his small hand into hers. "Pa's good at saving people. He saved me lots of times." Naira looked down at the boy, then over at Levi. Something had shifted. Some barrier had come down. They weren't strangers anymore. Not quite. They walked back toward the ranch house in a silence that felt different from before. Less cautious, more companionable. As if crossing that bridge together had created a bond none of them quite understood yet. That afternoon, Silas Hawthorne came riding up the path. He'd brought fresh bread from the store and a jar of preserves. When he saw Naira, his eyebrows rose, but he didn't comment right away, just tipped his hat politely. "Silas," Levi said, "this is Naira Silverthorne. She came instead of Catherine Whitmore." Silas studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Ma'am, welcome." "Thank you," Naira said. They sat on the porch, the four of them. Silas told stories about Levi's father, about the early days when this land was even wilder. He talked about his own wife, Margaret, who died of fever 12 years back, about how grief changed shape over time but never really left. "Sometimes the heart has room for more than one person," Silas said, looking at Levi meaningfully. "It's not betrayal to let someone new in. It's survival." Later, after Silas had gone and Samuel was playing near the creek, Naira helped Levi fix the chicken coop. One of the walls had come loose, and the hens kept escaping. She worked with practiced efficiency, holding boards while he hammered, her hands as steady as any man's. "Your father taught you carpentry?" Levi asked. "My father taught me everything. In our tribe, women had to know how to build, how to hunt, how to survive. Gender didn't matter when it came to staying alive." "Where are they now, your tribe?" Her hands stilled on the board she was holding. "Scattered. The government moved us 4 years ago, said we'd have new land, better land. It was a lie. The land they gave us was dead. Nothing would grow. Then the flood came, washed away what little we'd built. My father, my mother, my younger brother. They all died when the bridge in our village collapsed. I was the only one who made it to shore." Levi set down his hammer. "I'm so sorry." "Everyone's sorry," she said quietly, "but sorry doesn't bring them back." "No," he agreed, "it doesn't." They finished the coop in silence. When Samuel ran over to inspect their work, Naira showed him how to check if a nail was driven true, how to test the strength of a joint. The boy soaked up her teaching like parched earth soaking up rain. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Levi found himself watching Naira and Samuel together in the garden plot she'd marked out. She was showing him seeds she carried in a small pouch, explaining which ones to plant now, which to save for spring. Samuel's face was animated in a way Levi hadn't seen since Emily died. Later, after Samuel was in bed, Levi and Naira sat on the porch. The night was cool, the stars brilliant overhead. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "Thank you for letting me stay," Naira said. "You're welcome here as long as you want," Levi replied. Then he hesitated. "I mean that. This arrangement, it doesn't have to be just one night. He needs someone who understands what he's going through. And I could use help with the ranch. If you wanted to stay, we could work something out." Naira turned to look at him. In the darkness, her eyes caught the starlight. "Are you sure? Having me here will bring trouble. People in town won't like it. An Apache woman living on your ranch. People in town don't run my life. Marcus Dalton does, or he tries to." Levi stiffened. "You know about Marcus?" "I hear things. I know he wants your land. I know he has influence. If I stay, he'll use it against you." "Let him try." Levi's voice was hard. "I'm tired of running my life by what men like Marcus Dalton think is acceptable." Naira smiled slightly. It was the first real smile he'd seen from her. "All right then, I'll stay. For a while at least." They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the stars wheel overhead. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that moment they'd made a choice that would change everything. The broken bridge, the shared grief, the quiet understanding that had grown between them over the course of one strange day. Inside, Samuel slept without nightmares for the first time in weeks, and somewhere in the darkness, the land itself seemed to exhale as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for these three broken people to find each other and begin, however tentatively, to heal. The wind rustled through the sage. The creek murmured over its red stones. And on the porch of the small ranch house, two people sat together, strangers becoming something more. Beneath a sky so vast and filled with stars it seemed to hold every possibility the future might bring. The third morning arrived with a peculiar stillness, the kind that settles over high desert country when the air itself seems to be waiting for something. September in the San Juan Basin brought days that started cold and grew hot by noon, the temperature swinging 30 degrees between dawn and midday. Levi Brennan woke before sunrise, as had become his habit in the 2 years since Emily died. But this morning was different. This morning, the sounds that pulled him from sleep weren't the echoes of loss, but the living sounds of a house that held more than one heartbeat. From downstairs came the soft clatter of dishes, the quiet humming of a woman's voice, low and melodic, singing something in a language Levi didn't understand, the smell of coffee, real coffee, properly brewed instead of the bitter sludge he'd been choking down for months. And beneath it all, the warm scent of baking bread. He dressed quickly, pulling on work clothes that were clean because Naira had washed them yesterday, hanging them on the line to dry in the desert sun. Small things, domestic things, things he'd stopped noticing were missing until they appeared again. When he came down the stairs, the kitchen glowed with early morning light. Naira stood at the stove, her long black braid falling over one shoulder, flour dusting her hands and apron. She'd found Emily's apron in a drawer and was wearing it without any apparent self-consciousness, as if she understood that using another woman's things wasn't disrespect but continuation. Samuel sat at the table, chin propped on his hands, watching Naira with the kind of absorbed attention children reserve for things that fascinate them completely. On the table before him lay 3 eggs, one of them cracked open into a bowl. "Good morning," Levi said from the doorway. Naira turned, and something in her expression made his chest tight. Not quite a smile, but something warmer than the careful neutrality she'd worn those first days. An ease, a belonging. "Coffee's ready," she said. "And there's cornbread. Samuel helped me make it." "I cracked the eggs," Samuel announced proudly. "Mama Naira showed me how to do it so the shells don't get in." The word hung in the air. Mama. Levi saw Naira's hands still for just a moment, saw her swallow. They talked about this quietly after Samuel had first used the title 2 days ago. Naira had been uncertain, feeling like she was stealing something that belonged to Emily's memory. But Levi had told her what he believed to be true, that love wasn't a finite resource, that Samuel's heart had room for more than one mother, that Emily would have wanted her son to be cared for by someone who loved him. "That's good work, son," Levi said, sitting down at the table. A man who can cook is a man who can survive on his own. Samuel beamed. Then, with the directness of children, he said, Pa, why did that man call Mama Naira a bad name yesterday? The question landed like a stone dropped in still water. Yesterday. Porter, the man from town with his casual cruelty and his ugly words. Levi had hoped Samuel hadn't heard, but of course he had. Children heard everything. Naira brought the cornbread to the table, golden and steaming, and sat down. She looked at Samuel with those dark, steady eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than any person should have to carry. Some people don't like things that are different from what they're used to, she said carefully. They see my brown skin and my black hair, and they remember stories they've been told about Apache people. Bad stories, most of them. Stories that make them afraid. But you're not scary, Samuel protested. No, but fear doesn't always care about truth. Your papa understands that, which is why he stood up for me. That's what brave people do. They stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Levi met her eyes across the table. In that look was acknowledgement, gratitude, and something deeper. A recognition that they were in this together now. That decisions made in haste were becoming commitments they both intended to honor. After breakfast, they went out to work the ranch. The morning air was cool and clean, carrying the scent of sage and sun-warmed earth. Naira had asked to learn everything about the operation, not content to stay in the house while Levi handled the outdoor work. She wanted to understand the land, the animals, the rhythm of seasons and water and survival. They rode out together to check the cattle in the far pasture. Samuel perched in front of Levi on his horse, chattering about the garden Naira was planting. The boy had taken to his new life with the resilience of children, his nightmares less frequent, his laughter returning in bursts that reminded Levi painfully of Emily. Naira rode her own horse, borrowed from Silas, sitting the animal with unconscious grace. She'd told Levi she'd learned to ride as a child, that in her tribe everyone rode, men and women equally, because survival in desert country required mobility. Tell me about the water, she said as they rode, gesturing toward Redstone Creek glinting in the morning sun. You said it's why Marcus Dalton wants this land. Levi explained the intricacies of water rights in New Mexico territory, how the doctrine of prior appropriation meant that whoever used water first had primary rights to it, how his father had been among the first settlers in this basin, had established his claim to Redstone Creek decades ago, how the creek originated in the mountains to the north, flowed through Brennan land, then continued southeast to Marcus Dalton's ranch and onto other properties downstream. The law says I can use what I need for my cattle and crops, Levi said, but I can't dam it or divert it so much that downstream users get nothing. It's a balance. Marcus wants to upset that balance. He wants to own the source so he can control how much water everyone else gets. More water means more cattle, more crops, more power. And if you won't sell, he'll find another way to get what he wants. Men like Marcus always do. They reached the herd, about 50 head of cattle grazing peacefully in grass still green from summer monsoons. Levi dismounted to check a calf he'd been worried about, one that had seemed listless a few days before. The calf appeared stronger now, nursing vigorously from its mother, and Levi felt some tension ease from his shoulders. Naira had dismounted as well and was walking the fence line that bordered the pasture, checking posts and wire with a practiced eye. After a few minutes, she called out, "This section here needs work. The wire's sagging and this post is rotting at the base." Levi joined her, impressed. She was absolutely right. The fence would hold for another month, maybe 2, but it needed attention before winter. How did you know to look for that? My father taught me. He said the difference between surviving and dying in hard country is seeing problems before they become disasters. A weak fence means lost cattle. Lost cattle mean no food. No food means death. So you learn to see the small things. Your father sounds like he was a wise man. Something passed across Naira's face, grief and love mixed together. He was. He could track an animal across bare bright rock, could find water in places that looked completely dry. He taught me everything he knew because he said knowledge was the only thing they couldn't take from us. She paused. He was wrong about that, though. They took him anyway. They worked together for the next 2 hours, replacing the rotting post, tightening wire, reinforcing weak sections. The physical labor felt good to Levi, productive in a way that went beyond mere maintenance. Working alongside Niram, watching her match his efforts stroke for stroke, created a rhythm he hadn't known he was missing. Partnership, shared burden, things he'd had with Emily and thought he'd never have again. Samuel helped where he could, holding tools, fetching things, learning by watching. Levi showed him how to dig a proper post hole, how to set a post so it wouldn't shift in winter frost, how to tension wire so it held firm but had enough give to absorb impact. The same lessons his father had taught him, the same ones his grandfather had taught before that. Continuity, legacy, the things a man left behind that mattered more than money or property. They were finishing the last section of fence when they heard it. The sound of hoofbeats approaching fast, not the measured pace of a friendly visitor, but something urgent, almost aggressive. Levi straightened, his hand instinctively moving toward the rifle strapped to his saddle. Old habits from living in territory that could turn dangerous without warning. A rider crested the ridge, silhouetted against the climbing sun. As he drew closer, Levi recognized him. Porter, the man from the general store who spent more time spreading gossip than selling goods, whose primary talent was making people uncomfortable with his prying questions and casual judgments. Porter reined up hard, his horse snorting and tossing its head in protest at the rough handling. His eyes went immediately to Naira, scanning her with an expression that made Levi's jaw tighten and his hands curl into fist. "Heard you had yourself a visitor out here, Brennan," Porter said, not bothering with any pretense of courtesy. "Didn't realize you'd gone and taken in a squaw." The word landed like a physical blow. Ugly, reductive, designed to hurt and diminish. Samuel, who'd been playing nearby, froze. Naira's face went carefully blank, that mask of protective neutrality Levi was learning to recognize and hate because it meant she was being wounded, but refusing to show it. "Her name," Levi said, his voice dropping into a register cold enough to carry warning, "is Mrs. Brennan, and I'd strongly suggest you show some respect when you're on my property." Porter's eyebrows climbed. "Mrs. Brennan? You married her? An Indian?" "My marriage is none of your concern. Now state whatever business brought you out here or get off my land." "No need to get all riled up. Just passing along some news from town is all. Marcus Dalton's been asking around about your new, what should I call her, bride?" The word dripped with mockery. "Seems he's mighty interested in the situation out here. Says the community has a right to know when there's potentially dangerous individuals in their midst." Levi took 3 steps forward, close enough that Porter's horse sidled nervously. "Naira is my wife and poses no danger to anyone. You can tell Marcus Dalton that if he has concerns, he's welcome to bring them to me directly instead of sending errand boys to deliver his messages." Porter held up his hands in mock surrender, but his smirk remained. "Just trying to keep folks informed. No offense meant. But you know how it is, Brennan. Indians got a way of bringing trouble wherever they settle. Ask anyone who's been out here long enough. Ask the families who lost people in the raids 10 years back. Some folks got long memories about that sort of thing." "Get out." Levi's voice was flat, final. "Now." Porter shrugged, turned his horse, and rode off at a more leisurely pace than he'd arrived, making it clear he was leaving because he chose to, not because he'd been ordered. The dust from his horse's hooves hung in the still air long after he'd disappeared over the ridge. When Levi turned back, he found that Naira had retreated several steps, putting distance between herself and the conversation. Her shoulders were rigid, her hands clenched at her sides. Samuel had gone to her, pressed against her side in a gesture of comfort or protection or both. "I'm sorry," Levi said. "Don't be. I told you this would happen. I've lived with this kind of thing my whole life." "That doesn't make it right." "No, but it makes it expected." She looked at him directly. "Marcus Dalton knows I'm here now. He'll use it. You understand that, don't you? He'll find a way to use me against you. Let him try." "Levi, be realistic. You're a white rancher with property and standing in this community. I'm an Apache woman with no papers, no family, no legal right to be anywhere. If Marcus decides to make trouble, he has all the weapons, and I have none." Levi crossed to her, gently moved Samuel aside, and took both of Naira's hands in his. They were rough from work, scarred in places, capable hands that had built and healed and survived things he couldn't imagine. Then we'll get you weapons, papers, legal standing, whatever it takes. How? I don't know yet, but Silas will. He knows the law better than anyone I've met. We'll figure this out. They rode back to the ranch in heavy silence, Samuel sensing the tension and staying quiet, his usual chatter subdued. The morning's ease had been shattered, replaced by the awareness that the peace they'd found was fragile, dependent on the whims of men like Marcus Dalton, who held power and weren't afraid to use it. That evening, after they'd eaten supper and Samuel had been sent to bed, Levi and Ira sat on the porch. The September night had turned cool, stars emerging in the darkening sky like pinpricks in black cloth. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, its voice lonely and wild. "Tell me everything about Marcus Dalton," Naira said. "I need to know exactly what we're facing." So Levi told her everything he knew, everything he'd heard, everything his father had warned him about before he died. Marcus Dalton owned 800 acres, the largest ranch in the territory. He'd come west after the Civil War, served in the cavalry during the Apache campaigns in Arizona, lost men under his command in fights with Geronimo's warriors, came away from those years with a hatred for Apache people that bordered on pathological. His wife, Sarah, had died 5 years ago from fever, leaving Marcus childless and bitter. Since then, he'd grown harder, meaner, more obsessed with expanding his holdings and crushing anyone who stood in his way. He had the sheriff in his pocket, had influence with the territorial judge, had enough money to make problems disappear or appear as needed. "He's wanted this land since before my father died," Levi said. "Offered to buy it 3 times. My father refused every time. Said a man doesn't sell what he's built with his own hands, not while he's still breathing. When I inherited," Marcus tried again, "I told him the same thing my father did, that this land stays in the family. And now I've given him ammunition," Naira said quietly. "An Apache woman living on your ranch. He'll use that to say you're unstable, that you're harboring criminals. Whatever story serves his purpose. Then we prove him wrong. We show everyone that you're here legally, that our marriage is legitimate, that there's nothing to his accusations." "But our marriage isn't what people would call normal, Levi. We barely know each other. We married for practical reasons, not love. If Marcus challenges that, if he claims it's fraudulent, how do we prove otherwise?" Levi was quiet for a long moment thinking. Finally, he said, "By living it. By showing everyone that practical reasons can turn into something real. By building the kind of partnership that makes sense even if it didn't start the way people expect." Naira turned to look at him in the darkness. "You really think we can do that?" "I think we're already doing it. You're raising Samuel like he's your own. You're working this ranch like it's your home. I'm starting to rely on you for things I haven't relied on anyone for in years. That's not nothing. That's the foundation of something real." She didn't answer, but after a moment, she leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of exhaustion maybe, or trust, or both. They sat like that for a long time, watching the stars wheel overhead and listening to the night sounds of the desert. The 4th morning brought Silas Hawthorne riding hard despite his age, his face grim with news. Levi was mucking out the barn when he heard the urgent hoofbeats. He came out to find Silas dismounting with more speed than his 64 years usually allowed, breathing hard from the ride. "What's wrong?" "Marcus filed a formal complaint with Sheriff Caldwell," Silas said without preamble. "Claims Anira's residing here illegal and says she doesn't have proper documentation under the Indian Relocation Act of 1881. The words hit Levi like cold water. "What kind of documentation?" "Either a certificate of citizenship or papers showing she's legally residing on a designated reservation. The law requires all Apache individuals to be accounted for, to be either on reservation land or documented as legal residents if they're living elsewhere. Without those papers, she's technically in violation of territorial law." Naira had emerged from the house at the sound of Silas's arrival. She stood on the porch now, Samuel beside her, and even from a distance, Levi could see the color drain from her face as she overheard the conversation. "I don't have papers," she said, her voice carrying across the yard. "My tribe was never officially relocated. We just scattered after the flood. I've been moving from place to place for 4 years, town to town, never staying anywhere long enough to need documentation. I have nothing that proves I have a legal right to be anywhere." Samuel looked up at her, confused and frightened. What does that mean? Silas climbed down from his horse, grimacing as his old joints protested. It means Sheriff Caldwell is legally obligated to investigate. If he determines that Naira lacks proper documentation, he'll have to issue an order for removal. Removal to where, Levi demanded. Most likely to the Mescalero Reservation in southern New Mexico, or possibly back to Arizona territory, depending on which jurisdiction claims authority over her tribe's descendants. Either way, she'd be forced to leave within a specified time frame, probably 30 days. Levi felt his world tilting. 4 days. They'd had 4 days of peace, 4 days of building something that felt like a family, and now it was being threatened by bureaucratic machinery and Marcus Dalton's vindictive determination to control everything he could see. There has to be a way around this, he said. There is one way. Silas looked between Levi and Naira, his weathered face thoughtful. Marriage. If Naira is legally married to a U.S. citizen who owns property, she automatically gains residency rights. The law can't deport the legal wife of a property-owning American. We are married, Levi said. On paper, yes. But Marcus is already claiming the marriage is fraudulent, and he's telling anyone who will listen that you rushed into this union purely to circumvent deportation laws, which would make the marriage invalid. If we're going to use it as protection, we need to prove it's legitimate. Naira's hands gripped the porch railing. How do we prove that? We've been married less than a week. We barely knew each other when we made those vows. By demonstrating that it's a genuine partnership, Silas said. By showing that you're building a real life together, not just a legal fiction. Witnesses who can testify to the authenticity of your relationship. Evidence of shared domestic life. Proof that this marriage has substance beyond avoiding deportation. After Silas left with promises to research the legal angles more thoroughly, Levi found Naira in the garden. The next morning, Silas returned with Reverend Thompson. The ceremony would need to happen quickly before Sheriff Caldwell could act on Marcus's complaint. They gathered on the repaired bridge at noon. The September sun was high and warm, casting sharp shadows on the wooden planks Levi had replaced. Reverend Thompson stood at the center, his Bible open, while Silas and Deputy Miller served as witnesses. Samuel stood beside his father, wearing his best clothes, his face solemn with the weight of the moment. Naira wore the simple blue dress she'd arrived in, her hair braided with small white flowers Samuel had picked that morning. Dearly beloved, Reverend Thompson began, his voice carrying over the sound of the creek below. We are gathered here in the sight of God to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. Levi took Naira's hands. They were rough from work, strong, capable. He looked into her dark eyes and saw his own uncertainty reflected back, but also determination. They were doing this for survival, yes, but there was something more, something neither was ready to name yet. When it came time for the vows, Levi spoke clearly. I, Levi Brennan, take you, Naira Silverthorne, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you, to provide for you, to stand beside you in whatever troubles may come. Naira's voice was steady. I, Naira Silverthorne, take you, Levi Brennan, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to care for your home and your son, to work beside you, to be honest with you, to build something real from what we're beginning today. Reverend Thompson pronounced them married. You may kiss the bride. Levi leaned forward and kissed her forehead, gentle and respectful. It wasn't passion, but it was promise. Samuel cheered, Silas clapped, and for one perfect moment, it felt like everything might actually work out. Then the sound of horses shattered the peace. Marcus Dalton appeared on the road above, flanked by Sheriff Caldwell and 2 ranch hands. He dismounted and strode toward them with cold confidence. Well, well, Marcus said, a wedding, how convenient. Reverend Thompson stepped forward. The ceremony is complete, Mr. Dalton. These two are legally married under territorial law. Are they? Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. He looked at the marriage certificate Silas held. Seems awfully quick. An Apache woman shows up, and within days she's married to the one rancher standing between me and control of Redstone Creek. My marriage is none of your concern, Levi said, his voice hard. Oh, but it is. When I have reason to believe this is a fraudulent marriage designed solely to circumvent deportation laws, it becomes very much my concern. Marcus turned to Sheriff Caldwell. Sheriff, I want this marriage investigated. If it's proven to be a sham, both of them should face legal consequences. Sheriff Caldwell looked uncomfortable but nodded. I'll need to file a report. Marcus leaned close to Levi as he remounted. Enjoy your wedding day, Brandon. It might be the only one you get. This marriage won't protect her for long, and when it falls apart, I'll be waiting. He rode away, leaving threat hanging in the air like smoke. Silas put a hand on Levi's shoulder. Don't let him ruin this. You did what you had to do. But as Levi watched Naira's face close off, watched her retreat into that protective mask she wore when wounded, he wondered if Marcus had already won. The day after the wedding, Levi found Naira in the garden. Her hands worked mechanically, pulling weeds that hadn't even sprouted yet, needing something physical to do with the anxiety coursing through her. Samuel was playing near the creek, far enough away not to hear adult conversations. Levi knelt beside Naira, his presence a question and an offer of comfort. I should leave, she said without looking at him, before the sheriff comes with papers. I should just disappear, save you all this trouble. No, Duffino. Levi, be reasonable. If I'm gone, Marcus loses his weapon. The complaint becomes moot. You and Samuel can go back to your lives. Our lives, he corrected. You're part of our lives now. And what kind of man would I be if I let you go just because things got difficult? What would that teach Samuel about standing by the people you care about? She finally looked at him, and he saw tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. You barely know me. You don't owe me this kind of loyalty. Maybe not, but I owe it to myself. I owe it to the man I want Samuel to see when he looks at his father. I owe it to Emily's memory, to honor what she taught me about defending people who can't defend themselves. And maybe I owe it to what we're building here, because it matters. You matter. Naira closed her eyes, tears falling more freely now. I'm so tired of running. I'm so tired of being told I don't belong anywhere. But I can't let you lose Samuel because of me. I won't be responsible for that. We're not going to lose Samuel. We're going to fight this, and we're going to win, together. That evening brought another development, this one even more troubling. Silas returned near sunset with more news, his expression grave. He waited until Samuel was out of earshot before speaking. I did some digging in town, talked to people, asked careful questions. Marcus has been making inquiries about Catherine Whitmore. Someone, I suspect Marcus himself, wrote to the Postal Service in Santa Fe asking about forwarding addresses for anyone connected to that name. It's only a matter of time before he learns about William Whitmore, Catherine's father. Naira's hand went to her throat. If he finds out about William, if he learns that Catherine ran away from her father, he'll try to connect me to that, make it seem like I helped a daughter flee her legal guardian. Exactly, and William Whitmore is wealthy, well-connected. If Marcus puts him in touch with investigators looking for Catherine, they could claim you aided in kidnapping or helped a minor escape legal custody. Catherine's 25 years old, Levi protested. She's an adult who can make her own decisions. You and I know that, but William Whitmore has enough money and influence to claim his daughter was mentally unfit, under duress, not of sound mind when she left. He could make a legal case that anyone who helped her was contributing to a crime. It wouldn't hold up in federal court, probably, but in territorial court, with a sympathetic judge, he might have a chance. The threat expanded, grew new heads like a hydra. Deportation, custody challenges, criminal accusations. Each angle Marcus could exploit, each weapon he could use to destroy what they were building. That night, Levi barely slept. He lay in his bed, acutely aware that Naira was in the next room, that Samuel slept down the hall, that everything he cared about was suddenly, terrifyingly vulnerable. Near midnight, unable to bear the racing thoughts any longer, he rose and went downstairs. He found Naira already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold in her hands. She looked up when he entered, no surprise on her face, as if she'd been expecting him or perhaps had been waiting for him. Couldn't sleep either, he asked. She shook her head. I keep thinking about all the ways this could go wrong, all the things Marcus could do, all the ways I could end up losing everything again. Levi sat down across from her. Tell me about your family. You've mentioned them, but you've never really told me the whole story. Naira was quiet for so long, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then she began to speak, her voice low and heavy with old grief. My father's name was Tachi. It means deer. He was the best of the tracker in our tribe, could follow the sign across bare rock, could find water where everyone else saw only dust and death. My mother was Desba. She wove baskets so beautiful that traders came from 3 territories away to buy them. My brother Nitis was 12 when he died. He wanted to be a warrior, wanted to earn his man name. She paused, sipped the cold tea without seeming to notice. We lived in Arizona territory, near the White Mountains, beautiful country, pine trees and clear stream and meadows where deer came to graze at dawn. Then the army came and said we had to leave, said the land was needed for settlers, promised us new land in New Mexico, said it would be just as good. But it wasn't. It was desert, harsh, dry, nothing like what we'd left. No game, no good water, soil too poor to grow anything. They'd sent us there to die slowly instead of killing us outright. But we tried. My father said survivors adapt, so we adapted. Started to build again. It was hard, but we were doing it. Her hands trembled around the cup. Then came the flood. The monsoon rains that year were heavier than anyone remembered. The river swelled, broke its banks, came through the camp in the middle of the night. My father had built a bridge across a ravine, sturdy enough for normal water, but this wasn't normal. The water rose so fast, so high. I saw them, saw my family trying to cross. My father, my mother, my brother. The bridge collapsed. The water took them. How did you survive? I wasn't on the bridge. I'd been sleeping at a friend's shelter that night, higher ground. I heard the screaming, ran to help, saw them fall, tried to reach them, but the current was too strong. I grabbed the first person I could, a child from another family, got her to safety, but my own brother was swept past me, calling for help, and I couldn't reach him. Tears ran down her face now, silent and steady. For years, I've asked myself why. Why did I save someone else's child instead of my own blood? Why was I on high ground that night? Why did I survive when people better than me died? Levi reached across the table and took her hands. You saved a life. That child lived because of you. That matters. Does it? Because some days it doesn't feel like it matters at all. Yes, he said firmly, it matters. Just like you being here matters. Just like what you're doing for Samuel matters. You can't undo the past, Naira. None of us can. But you can honor your family's memory by living fully, by not giving up, by building something new even when the old is lost. She looked at him with those dark, deep eyes that held so much pain and so much strength. Is that what you're doing? Building something new? I'm trying. For the first time since Emily died, I'm trying. And you're a big part of why I can. They sat together in the quiet kitchen, hands joined across the table. 2 broken people trying to believe they could be whole again. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and possibilities. The 5th day dawned clear and ominous. Levi was in the barn, tending to a horse that had developed a slight limp, when he heard Naira scream. The sound was pure terror, cutting through the morning air like a knife. He ran outside to find her kneeling beside Silas, who lay on the ground clutching his leg, his face gray with pain. His horse stood nearby, reins trailing, looking guilty and frightened. What happened? Levi dropped to his knees beside them. Snake spooked the horse, Silas gasped through gritted teeth. Threw me hard. I heard my leg crack when I landed. Naira was already running her hands along Silas's leg with surprising gentleness and precision, her fingers probing carefully. Don't try to move. The bone's definitely broken. I can feel the fracture. She looked up at Levi, and in that moment she was completely transformed. No fear, no uncertainty, pure competence and focus. I need 2 straight branches, strong wood, about this long. She held her hands apart to demonstrate the length. And cloth strips, old sheets if you have them, also your sharpest knife. Levi ran to get what she needed, his heart pounding. When he returned, Naira had carefully positioned Silas so he wasn't putting weight on the injured leg. She'd also produced a small leather pouch from her pocket, one Levi had seen her carrying but never asked about. This is going to hurt, she told Silas, her voice calm and authoritative. The bone needs to be set before we can splint it. I'm going to give you something for the pain first. She opened the pouch and pulled out what looked like dried herbs and bark. With quick, efficient movements, she ground some of it between her fingers, mixed it with water from the canteen Levi handed her, and gave the mixture to Silas to drink. What is that? Silas asked, even through his pain, maintaining his natural curiosity. Willow bark, white sage, and something my grandmother called ghost flower. It won't make the pain go away completely, but it will dull it enough that you won't pass out when I set the bone. They waited 10 minutes for the medicine to take effect. Naira used the time to cut away Silas's pant leg, exposing the injury. The break was visible as a deformity in the shin, the leg bent at an unnatural angle, already swelling and darkening with bruising. It made Levi's stomach turn, but Naira studied it with clinical detachment. Ready? She asked Silas. He nodded, his jaw set. Do what you need to do. What followed was one of the most difficult things Levi had ever witnessed. Naira worked with steady hands and quiet confidence, manipulating the broken bone back into alignment. Silas groaned, then gasped, then finally did pass out despite the medicine, which Naira said was probably for the best. She continued working, positioning the splints, binding them tightly with cloth strips, creating a rigid support structure that would hold the leg immobile while it healed. When she finished, she sat back on her heels, breathing hard from the effort and concentration. Her hands were stained with blood where the rough, broken skin had scraped them, but her work was precise and professional. The splint was as good as any doctor could have done, maybe better. How did you learn to do that? Levi asked, amazed. My grandmother was our tribe's healer. She taught me from the time I was 6 years old, said I had the hands for it, steady and sure. She showed me how to set bones, stitch wounds, deliver babies, identify healing plants. She said medical knowledge was sacred, that it made you a servant of life itself. Silas stirred, consciousness returning. Did it work? He mumbled. You're still attached to your leg, if that's what you're asking, Naira said with a hint of humor. But you won't be riding anywhere for at least 6 weeks, possibly 8. They got Silas into the house, into Levi's bed since it was on the ground floor, and Silas wouldn't be able to manage stairs. Naira stayed with him throughout the day, changing his bandages, monitoring his condition, giving him more of her herbal mixture when the pain grew too intense. By evening, Silas was resting relatively comfortably, his color improved, his breathing easier. You saved my life, he told Naira as the sun set outside the window. Or at least saved my leg, which amounts to the same thing out here. You would have survived, Naira said. The bone hadn't broken through the skin, so the risk of infection was lower. But this way you'll heal faster and the leg will be straighter. Where did your grandmother learn all this? From her grandmother who learned from hers, going back generations. My people didn't have doctors the way white towns do. We had healers who learned the old knowledge, passed it down. My grandmother said the land provides everything we need if we know how to listen, if we pay attention to what the plants tell us. Silas reached out and patted her hand. You're a remarkable woman, Naira. Any fool can see that. Marcus Dalton is a bitter old man who can't see past his own prejudices. Don't let him drive you away from here. That night, with Silas sleeping peacefully in the main room thanks to Naira's medicines, Levi found her outside on the porch. She was sitting on the steps, looking up at the stars emerging in the deepening dusk. Her hands still bore faint bloodstains despite multiple washings. You were incredible today, Levi said, sitting beside her. I did what anyone with training would do. No, most people would have panicked and would have made things worse. You knew exactly what to do and you did it without hesitation. Silas is right. You're remarkable. Naira leaned against his shoulder, exhaustion finally catching up with her. I'm terrified, Levi. Every day I'm terrified that something will happen to take this away. This place, you, Samuel. The first time in 4 years I felt like I belonged somewhere, and it's all so fragile. One wrong move, one legal maneuver from Marcus Dalton, and I lose everything again. Levi put his arm around her shoulders. We won't let that happen. We'll fight, whatever it takes. But what if fighting isn't enough? Then we'll fight harder, and we'll do it together because that's what we promised. Stand beside each other, When troubles come, remember? She nodded against his shoulder, and they stayed like that as the stars multiplied overhead and the desert night settled around them, with its vast silence and its whispered promises that maybe, just maybe, broken people could find wholeness again if they held on to each other tightly enough. The eighth morning arrived with news that shattered whatever fragile peace they'd managed to build. Levi was helping Silas sit up in bed, the old man's leg healing well under Naira's careful attention, when Deputy Miller rode up the path. Behind him came two other riders, and Levi's stomach dropped when he recognized one of them as Sheriff Caldwell himself, a portly man of 55 with small eyes and a mean streak he disguised as devotion to law and order. Levi stepped out onto the porch, Naira appearing beside him a moment later. She'd been in the kitchen teaching Samuel how to make biscuits, and she still wore her apron, flour dusting her hands. She froze when she saw the sheriff, some instinct warning her this wasn't a social call. "Mr. Brennan," Sheriff Caldwell said, not bothering to dismount. "Mrs. Brennan?" He said Naira's name with a slight emphasis that made it clear he questioned the title. "I'm here on official business." "State it," Levi said, his voice flat. The sheriff pulled a folded document from his coat. "I have here a petition filed by Marcus Dalton challenging your custody of Samuel Brennan. Judge Harrington has agreed to hear the case. You're ordered to appear in court in Mesa Ridge 5 days from now, on the 14th of October. The words hit like a physical blow. Levi felt Naira sway beside him, felt his own knees go weak. "On what grounds?" "The petition claims you're emotionally unfit to care for a minor child, cites your wife's recent death, your hasty remarriage to someone you barely knew, and questions about your judgment and stability. Judge Harrington takes these matters seriously. He's ordering a full review of the custody arrangement." "That's insane," Levi said, his voice rising. "Anyone can see Samuel is thriving. He's healthy, happy, well cared for." "That'll be for the judge to determine. I'm just serving the papers." Sheriff Caldwell tossed the document onto the porch. "You'd be wise to get yourself a lawyer, Brennan. Judge Harrington doesn't look kindly on people who waste his time, and if Marcus has filed this complaint, you can bet he's got a strong case prepared." After they rode away, Levi picked up the papers with shaking hands. The legal language was dense and intimidating, but the core accusation was clear enough. Marcus was claiming that Levi's rapid remarriage to an Apache woman he'd known less than 2 weeks demonstrated poor judgment, that the household was unstable, that Samuel would be better served by temporary placement with a more traditional family while Levi's fitness was evaluated, and the family Marcus was proposing? His own. Marcus Dalton, childless and bitter, wanted to take Samuel. Naira read over Levi's shoulder, her breath coming fast. "He's using me, using our marriage as proof you're unstable. If I hadn't come here, if you hadn't married me, he'd have no case." "Don't," Levi said sharply. "Don't blame yourself. Marcus would have found another angle. This is about destroying me, not about you. But I made it easier for him." Silas had managed to maneuver himself to where he could see the doorway, propped up on pillows. "Both of you stop talking like we've already lost. We haven't even started fighting yet." His voice carried the authority of a man who'd survived a war and countless other battles. "Levi, you need to get to town today. Find Eleanor Marsh." "The lawyer?" "She's the only lawyer in 3 counties who isn't in Marcus's pocket. She's young, only been practicing a few years, but she's sharp as a tack, and she doesn't back down from bullies. If anyone can help you, it's her." Levi rode to Mesa Ridge that afternoon, leaving Naira with Samuel and Silas. The town was a collection of adobe and wood buildings clustered around a dusty main street, backed by the San Juan Mountains rising purple in the distance. It was hardly more than a wide spot in the territorial road, but it had a courthouse, a jail, 3 saloons, and a general store that doubled as the post office. Eleanor Marsh's office was above the general store, a single room with a desk, 2 chairs, and shelves overflowing with law books. She was younger than Levi expected, maybe 30, with dark hair pinned severely back and eyes that assessed him the moment he walked through the door. "Mr. Brennan," she said, gesturing to a chair, "I heard you might be coming. Marcus Dalton's custody challenge is the talk of the town. Can you help me?" "That depends. Tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. Don't embellish. Don't lie. I need the complete truth if I'm going to fight for you." So Levi told her about Emily's death, about the marriage agency, about Naira arriving instead of Catherine, about their decision to marry for practical reasons that were becoming something more, about Marcus's vendetta over the water rights, about the threat of deportation and the rushed wedding and the accusation of fraud. Eleanor listened without interruption, taking notes in neat, precise handwriting. When he finished, she sat back and steepled her fingers, thinking. This is complicated, she said finally, but not impossible. The core of Marcus's case is that your marriage is fraudulent and that your judgment is impaired. We need to prove two things. First, that your marriage is legitimate regardless of how it started, and second, that Samuel is demonstrably better off with you than he would be anywhere else. How do we prove that? Witnesses, documentation. We show the court what your life actually looks like. How Naira cares for Samuel, how she's integrated into your household, how the child has improved under her care. We show that your marriage might have started as an arrangement, but has become a genuine partnership. And we make Marcus look like exactly what he is, a vindictive man with ulterior motives who's using the law as a weapon. Will Judge Harrington listen to that? Eleanor's expression turned grim. Judge Harrington is old-fashioned and set in his ways. He doesn't approve of what he calls hasty unions or unconventional arrangements. But he's also supposed to put the child's welfare first. If we can demonstrate that Samuel's welfare depends on staying with you and Naira, we have a chance, was. Over the next 3 days, Redstone Creek Ranch became a war room. Eleanor Marsh arrived each morning with her leather satchel full of law books and papers, transforming the kitchen table into a makeshift legal office. On the first day, she interviewed Naira for 3 hours. The questions were thorough and sometimes painful. Tell me about every interaction you've had with Samuel, Eleanor said, pen poised over paper. Every meal you have cooked, every lesson you have taught, every time he's come to you for comfort. I need specifics. Naira recounted it all, teaching Samuel to crack eggs without getting shells in the mixture, showing him which plants were safe to eat and which were poison. The night he had had a nightmare and she'd sung him an Apache lullaby until he fell back asleep. Good, Eleanor said. That's what the judge needs to hear. Not vague statements about caring for him, but concrete examples of mothering. She turned to Levi. And you? Tell me about your relationship with Naira. Not the marriage on paper, but the reality. When did you start seeing her as more than a solution to a problem? Levi thought carefully. The day on the bridge, when she was terrified but crossed anyway because she refused to let fear control her. I saw strength I hadn't seen in anyone, including myself. That's good. Remember that. Specificity matters. On the second day, Eleanor spoke with Samuel. She was gentle but direct. Samuel, in court, a lawyer might ask you questions to try to confuse you. Let's practice. She knelt to his level. If someone asked you if you'd rather live in a big house with lots of toys, what would you say? Samuel frowned, thinking. I'd say I already have what I need. My family. Perfect. And if they ask if you're scared of Mama Naira because she's Apache? That's a dumb question, Samuel said indignantly. She's not scary. She's my mama. Eleanor smiled. Good. Hold on to that honesty. The third day was devoted to gathering witnesses and evidence. Silas, despite his broken leg, rode his horse carefully into town and returned with the commitments from Reverend Thompson, Mrs. Henderson, and Deputy Miller. Miller's testimony will be crucial, Silas explained. He's law enforcement. His word carries weight, especially since he's not beholden to Marcus. Eleanor also had them document everything. Receipts showing Naira purchased fabric to make clothes for Samuel, the garden layout in Naira's handwriting, even the herbal medicines she'd prepared for Silas's leg. Evidence, Eleanor said, spreading it all on the table. Physical proof that this isn't a sham marriage but a functioning household. That evening, Eleanor reviewed her strategy one final time. Marcus's lawyer will try to paint you as emotionally unstable, Levi. They'll bring up Emily's death, your grief, claim you're not thinking clearly. You need to acknowledge the grief but show you've moved forward. She turned to Naira. They'll attack your character, your heritage, your past. You cannot react with anger. Calm, dignified responses. Show them the same strength you showed crossing that bridge. What about Samuel? Levi asked. Will they really put him on the stand? They might try to prevent it, but I'll push for it. The judge needs to hear directly from the child that he's happy, that he feels safe, that he wants to stay with you both. Eleanor packed her papers. One more thing. Judge Harrington is fair, but he's old-fashioned. He won't like that your marriage happened quickly. Our job is to show him that quick doesn't mean invalid, that genuine bonds can form faster than society might expect. After she left, Levi found Naira standing at the window, looking out at the darkening sky. "What if we lose?" she whispered. "We won't. But what if we do?" Levi turned her to face him. "Then we appeal. We fight again. We keep fighting until there's nothing left to fight with. I'm not giving up on this family." She leaned into him and he held her, both of them drawing strength from the other, preparing for the battle that would decide everything. The night before the hearing, Levi found it impossible to sleep. He paced the porch until well past midnight, his mind spinning through scenarios and arguments and fears. Naira came out to join him, wrapped in a shawl against the October chill. "You should be resting," he said. "So should you." They stood together, looking out at the darkness. The moon was nearly full, casting silver light across the ranch, making everything look ethereal and strange. "Tell me about Emily," Naira said quietly. "Really tell me, not just how she died, but who she was." Levi took a long breath. This was territory he'd been avoiding, afraid that talking about Emily with Naira felt like betrayal. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was necessary. "She was kind," he began, "patient with my rough edges. I was more closed off when we met, harder to reach. She had this way of getting past my defenses without making me feel invaded. She wanted a big family, lots of children. Said she wanted to fill this house with noise and laughter and life. She sounds wonderful." She was. When she got pregnant with Samuel, she was so happy. She used to talk to her belly, tell the baby about the ranch, about the life we'd built together. And with the second pregnancy, she was even happier. Said our family was growing, said Samuel would be a wonderful big brother. "What happened the day she died?" Naira asked gently. "You've mentioned it, but never told the whole story." Levi felt his throat tighten, but he forced himself to continue. "She went into labor early, 2 weeks before we expected. It was just us here, me and Emily and Samuel, who was 5 then. I wanted to ride for the doctor immediately, but Emily said we had time. She wanted to cross the bridge, wanted to get to her mother's house in town. Her mother had experience with difficult births, had helped deliver half the babies in Mesa Ridge." He paused, the memory sharp as broken glass. "But I was worried about the bridge. It was in bad shape even then, some of the planks rotting, ropes fraying. I'd been meaning to fix it, but hadn't gotten around to it. I was afraid Emily would fall, afraid the bridge would collapse under her weight with her being pregnant. So I made her wait. I told her to stay put while I rode to get the doctor, that we'd bring him back and then decide what to do." "How long were you gone?" 3 hours. 3 hours to get to town, find the doctor, convince him to come, ride back. By the time we returned, Emily had been in labor for hours alone except for Samuel, who was terrified. The baby had turned wrong, was coming breech. There was so much blood. His voice broke. The doctor said if we'd gotten her to her mother sooner, if someone with experience had been there from the start, they might have been able to turn the baby, might have prevented the hemorrhaging. But by the time we got there, by the time the doctor tried to fix it, it was too late for both of them. Emily bled out on our bed and the baby never drew breath. Naira took his hand. "You were trying to protect her." "I was protecting her from the wrong thing. I should have let her cross that bridge. Should have trusted her judgment about what she needed. Should have fixed the damn bridge months earlier, like I kept promising to do. Instead, I let my fear make the decision, and it killed them both." "You can't know that. Maybe the bridge would have collapsed and killed her and Samuel both. Maybe she would have died anyway, even with her mother's help. Some things are just fate, Levi. Some tragedies can't be prevented, no matter what choices we make." "Do you really believe that?" She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know. I want to believe it because the alternative is too painful. The alternative is that I killed my family by not being on that bridge with them when it collapsed. That I saved a stranger's child instead of my own brother because I made the wrong choice in a moment of panic. If I don't believe some things are just fate, then I have to believe I'm responsible for their deaths, and I don't know how to live with that. Levi turned to her, pulled her close. They held each other in the moonlight, two people carrying impossible guilt, trying to find some way to forgive themselves for surviving when the people they loved hadn't. Whatever happens tomorrow, Levi said, whatever the judge decides, I want you to know that I'm grateful you came here, that these days with you have been the first time I've felt alive since Emily died, that I don't regret marrying you, not for a second. Naira looked up at him, and in her eyes he saw something new, something that looked like it might be love, or the beginning of it, or at least the possibility. I don't regret it either, she whispered. Then for the first time they kissed. Not the chaste kiss on the forehead from their wedding day, but a real kiss, full of longing and hope and desperate need. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, both looked shaken by the intensity of what had passed between them. Tomorrow we fight, Levi said. Tomorrow we fight, Naira agreed. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock in the morning at the Mesa Ridge Courthouse, a squat adobe building that served as both courthouse and town hall. Levi, Naira, and Samuel arrived early, Eleanor Marsh meeting them on the steps. Silas had insisted on coming despite his broken leg, propped up on crutches that Levi had fashioned for him. Inside, the courtroom was small and stark, wooden benches for spectators, a judge's bench elevated at the front, tables for the opposing parties. Judge Harrington sat behind his bench, a man of 60 with white hair and a face carved from granite, eyes that had seen too much compromise and settled into rigid certainty as protection against moral ambiguity. Marcus Dalton was already there with his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Langley who'd come from Santa Fe specifically for this case. Marcus wore his finest suit, looked every inch the respectable rancher, played the part of concerned citizen perfectly. The courtroom filled quickly. Word had spread through town, and people came to watch, some out of genuine concern, others out of mere curiosity or the territorial equivalent of entertainment. Levi recognized faces, some sympathetic, others hostile, many simply neutral. Judge Harrington called the court to order, his voice carrying authority earned through decades of making decisions that affected people's lives. This is a custody hearing regarding the minor child Samuel Brennan. Marcus Dalton has petitioned the court to review the current custody arrangement and consider temporary placement of the child pending a full evaluation of the home environment. Mr. Langley, present your case. Langley stood, his movements calculated for maximum effect. Your Honor, this case concerns a child's welfare and whether his current guardian is fit to provide proper care. Let me establish the facts. Levi Brennan's wife Emily died 2 years ago under tragic circumstances. Mr. Brennan subsequently went into a deep depression, neglecting his ranch and, at times, his son. This isn't speculation, but documented fact. He pulled out papers, showed them to the judge. Here are statements from townspeople describing Mr. Brennan's condition during the first year after his wife's death. Withdrawn, uncommunicative, sometimes failing to bring his son to town for months at a time. Eleanor stood. Objection, Your Honor. Grief is not a crime, nor is it evidence of unfitness. Mr. Brennan was mourning his wife while continuing to care for his son. I'll allow it, Judge Harrington said, but make your point quickly, Mr. Langley. My point, Your Honor, is that Mr. Brennan has shown a pattern of poor judgment exacerbated by emotional instability. This pattern culminated in his decision to marry an Apache woman he'd known for less than a week, a woman who appeared at his ranch under questionable circumstances, a woman with no legal documentation, no verifiable history, and no connection to this community. Naira stiffened beside Levi, but Eleanor had coached her not to react, to maintain composure no matter what was said. Furthermore, Langley continued, warming to his theme, Mr. Brennan's marriage appears to be a transparent attempt to circumvent deportation laws. The timing is suspicious, the circumstances are irregular, and the entire arrangement suggests a man who makes rash decisions without considering the impact on his son. And what is your client's interest in this matter? Judge Harrington asked. My client, Marcus Dalton, is a respected member of this community with substantial resources and a stable home. He's offering to provide temporary care for Samuel while Mr. Brennan's situation is evaluated, ensuring the child's welfare during this uncertain time. Mr. Dalton has no ulterior motives beyond concern for a child who may be at risk. Eleanor rose for cross-examination. Mr. Dalton, isn't it true that you have attempted to purchase Mr. Brennan's ranch multiple times? Marcus stood, playing the part of reluctant witness. I've made offers, yes. Fair market offers for property adjacent to mine. And Mr. Brennan has refused each time? Yes. And isn't it also true that you've been vocal in your opposition to Apache people living in this territory? That you served in the campaigns against Apache tribes in Arizona? Marcus's face hardened. I served my country, yes. I lost good men fighting hostile forces. That's a matter of public record and something I'm proud of. So you harbor prejudice against Apache people? I harbor realistic concerns based on lived experience. That's not prejudice, Miss Marsh. That's wisdom. Eleanor turned to the judge. Your Honor, I submit that Mr. Dalton's true motivation is not concern for Samuel, but desire for Mr. Brennan's property and prejudice against Mrs. Brennan's heritage. This custody challenge is nothing more than harassment dressed up as civic duty. Judge Harrington held up a hand. I'll determine motivation, Miss Marsh. Mr. Brennan, you'll have your chance to present your case. For now, I want to hear from Marcus Dalton about his qualifications to care for the child should I grant temporary custody. What followed was an hour of testimony painting Marcus as the ideal guardian. Wealthy, stable, established. His ranch manager testified to his good character. His banker spoke of his financial stability. Even Sheriff Caldwell, clearly uncomfortable but obligated, confirmed that Marcus had never had trouble with the law. Then Eleanor began presenting her case, and the tide started to shift. Reverend Thompson testified first, speaking of the sincerity he had witnessed in Levi and Naira's wedding vows, the genuine commitment he saw between them. I performed many weddings in my years as a minister, Thompson said. You develop a sense for which unions are genuine and which are mere formalities. When Levi Brennan and Naira Silverthorne stood before me, they weren't reciting empty words. They were making real promises. I believe they meant every vow they spoke. Mrs. Henderson from the general store testified next. I've seen Mrs. Brennan in town several times now. She's always polite, always proper. More importantly, I've seen her with Samuel. The way she holds his hand, the way she listens when he talks, the way she corrects him gently when he's rude. That's not play acting, Your Honor. That's a mother caring for her child. Deputy Miller's testimony carried particular weight precisely because it was unexpected. He spoke quietly but firmly about his observations at the ranch, about Naira's medical skill in treating Silas's broken leg, about the visible improvement in Samuel's demeanor. I've known Samuel Brennan since he was born, Miller said. I watched him withdraw after his mother died, saw him become quiet and fearful. But when I saw him last week, he was different, smiling, talkative, engaged with the world. Whatever's happening in that household, it's helping that child, not harming him. Then Silas testified, hobbling to the witness stand on his crutches, his broken leg a visible reminder of Naira's competence. I've known Levi Brennan since he was a boy, Silas said, his voice carrying the weight of decades. I knew his father helped build this territory when it was nothing but dirt and hope. I watched Levi nearly destroy himself with grief after Emily died. I also watched him come back to life when Naira arrived. That woman saved my leg and possibly my life. She's given Samuel back his childhood. She's made Levi remember what it means to be alive instead of just surviving. If you take her away, if you take Samuel away, you'll destroy that family. And for what? To satisfy Marcus Dalton's greed and spite? Judge Harrington's expression was unreadable, but he leaned forward slightly. Strong words, Mr. Hawthorne. True words, Your Honor. I'm an old man. I don't have time for pretty lies. Marcus Dalton wants Levi's land, and he's using this child to get it. That's the plain truth, and everyone in this courtroom knows it, even if they won't say it. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Judge Harrington looked at Levi. Mr. Brennan, you have the right to testify in your own defense. Levi stood, his heart hammering. Eleanor had coached him, but now that the moment had arrived, all the prepared words fled his mind. He walked to the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth. Langley came at him immediately, trying to rattle him. Mr. Brennan, you married Naira Silverthorne after knowing her for less than a week. Is that correct? Yes. You'd agree that's unusually fast? Yes. Would you say your judgment during that time was sound? Levi looked directly at Langley, then at Judge Harrington. My judgment was that a woman needed protection and my son needed a mother and I needed help. Maybe the timing was fast, but the reasoning was sound. Or the reasoning was that you needed a legal excuse to keep an undocumented Apache woman on your property? No, the reasoning was that I'd been dying slowly for 2 years and Naira reminded me what it meant to live. Eleanor stood for her examination. Mr. Brennan, tell the court about your marriage. Not the legal aspects, but the reality of your daily life with Naira. Levi took a breath, found his center. She gets up before dawn every day, makes breakfast, real food, not the burned offerings I'd been feeding Samuel. She teaches him things, patience and kindness, and how to read the land. She works the ranch as hard as any man I've known, fixes what's broken, tends what's sick. She saved Silas's leg when he was thrown from his horse, set a broken bone so well the doctor in town said he couldn't have done better. His voice grew stronger, more certain. But more than any of that, she's made this house a home again. She's given Samuel back his laughter. She's helped me remember that guilt doesn't honor the dead, that living does. She's everything I needed and didn't know how to ask for. Do you love her? Eleanor asked. The question hung in the air. Levi felt every eye in the courtroom on him. He looked at Naira sitting at the table, her face composed but her eyes bright with unshed tears. Yes, he said. I love her. Not the way I loved Emily. That was different. That was its own thing. But yes, I love Naira. I love the strength that carries her forward after losing everything. I love the gentleness she shows my son. I love the way she's teaching me that it's possible to build something new from broken pieces. His voice broke slightly. I made mistakes with Emily. I let fear guide me instead of trust, and she died because of it. I won't make that mistake again. I won't let fear or prejudice or Marcus Dalton's greed destroy this second chance I've been given. Naira is my wife. Samuel is my son. We're a family, maybe an unconventional one, but we're real, and we deserve the chance to stay together. The courtroom was silent when he finished. Even Judge Harrington looked affected, though he quickly composed himself. Then came the moment that changed everything. Eleanor stood and said, Your Honor, I'd like to call Samuel Brennan to testify. Langley objected immediately. The child is 7 years old. He's not competent to testify. But Judge Harrington surprisingly overruled him. The child's welfare is the subject of these proceedings. I'll hear what he has to say. But keep it brief, Miss Marsh. Samuel walked to the witness stand, so small he could barely see over the top. A bailiff brought him a box to stand on. The boy's eyes were huge, frightened, but when he looked at Levi and Naira, some courage seemed to flow into him. Eleanor spoke gently. Samuel, can you tell the judge about your life at home? I live with Pa and Mama Naira, Samuel said, his voice surprisingly clear. We have breakfast together every morning. Mama Naira makes cornbread and teaches me about plants. Pa teaches me about horses and fixing things. We work together. Are you happy? Yes. Were you happy before Mama Naira came? Samuel's small face crumpled. No, I was sad all the time. I missed Mama Emily so much, and Pa was sad too, and everything was gray and quiet and scary. And now? Now it's better. Mama Naira tells me stories about the stars. She showed me how to make a whistle from a reed. She sings songs in a different language, and then teaches me what the words mean. She makes Pa smile again. Tears started running down his cheeks. Please don't take her away. Please don't make me go somewhere else. I already lost one mama. I can't lose another one. The raw honesty of a child's grief silenced the entire courtroom. Even Langley looked uncomfortable. Judge Harrington's stern face softened just slightly. Then Langley made his critical mistake. He stood for cross-examination, clearly thinking he could use the child's testimony against Levi. Samuel, if you could live in a big house with lots of nice things, wouldn't that be better? No, Samuel said firmly. I don't need lots of things. I need my family. But wouldn't you like to have more toys? Better food? A bigger room? I don't care about that stuff. Samuel's voice rose, frustrated that the adult wasn't understanding. I want Pa and Mama Naira. Don't you understand? I already lost Mama Emily and the baby. I don't want to lose anyone else. Why do grown-ups always want to take away the people you love? The question hung in the air, unanswerable and devastating. Judge Harrington held up his hand. That's enough. The child may step down. As Samuel climbed down from the witness stand, he ran not to the table where Levi sat, but to Naira, throwing his arms around her waist, burying his face in her skirt. She lifted him up, held him close, whispering comfort in his ear while tears streamed down her own face. But the hearing wasn't over. Langley, sensing his case slipping away, played his final card. Your Honor, there's another matter the court should be aware of. We have evidence that Mrs. Brennan may have aided in a criminal act. He pulled out papers, showed them to the judge. Catherine Whitmore, daughter of merchant William Whitmore of Santa Fe, disappeared 2 months ago. Her father filed a missing person report, claimed his daughter was mentally unwell, and required supervision. Our investigation has revealed that Naira Silverthorne was the last person seen with Miss Whitmore before her disappearance. Naira went pale. Levi half rose from his seat, but Eleanor pulled him back down. Are you accusing Mrs. Brennan of kidnapping? Judge Harrington asked. I'm suggesting the court should investigate. If Mrs. Brennan helped an adult daughter flee her legal guardian under questionable circumstances, it raises serious questions about her judgment and character. Eleanor stood quickly. Your Honor, Catherine Whitmore is 25 years old, well past the age of majority. She's free to go where she pleases. If Mrs. Brennan helped her, it was an act of compassion, not a crime. That depends on Miss Whitmore's mental state at the time, Langley countered. Mr. Whitmore claims his daughter was not of sound mind, that anyone who aided her departure was contributing to her endangerment. Judge Harrington looked troubled. This is a serious allegation. Does the prosecution have any evidence beyond suspicion? Before Langley could answer, there was a commotion at the back of the courtroom. The doors opened and a woman walked in. Mummy walked in, well-dressed, blonde hair pinned up, face showing the kind of determination that came from making difficult choices and standing by them. I'm Catherine Whitmore, she announced clearly, and I need to testify. The courtroom exploded into whispers. Judge Harrington banged his gavel. Order! Order in this court! Catherine walked down the aisle, her chin high. When she reached the witness stand, she placed her hand on the Bible and swore to tell the truth. Then she looked directly at Judge Harrington. My name is Catherine Whitmore. I'm 25 years old, of sound mind, and I came here of my own free will to testify. My father, William Whitmore, is a violent man who beat me regularly after my mother died. He wanted to control every aspect of my life, including who I married. I wrote to Levi Brennan through a marriage agency as a means of escape. She paused, making sure everyone was listening. When the time came to leave, I realized that coming here would put Mr. Brennan and his son in danger. My father would have tracked me down, would have caused trouble for anyone who helped me. So I made the decision to go elsewhere, to relatives in Colorado who could protect me. I asked Naira to come here in my place, to explain to Mr. Brennan why I couldn't come, to ensure he didn't think I'd simply abandoned our correspondence. Mrs. Silverthorne didn't kidnap me or aid my escape. She befriended me when I had no one, and she honored my request to deliver a message. That's all she did. And if my father is trying to suggest otherwise, it's because he can't accept that I left him of my own free will. Langley stood. Miss Whitmore, your father claims... My father claims many things, most of them lies. He claimed my mother fell down the stairs when in truth he pushed her. He claimed I was mentally unwell when in truth I was simply desperate to escape his abuse. I'm here today to set the record straight and to tell this court that Naira Silverthorne is a good person who helped me at great risk to herself. If you punish her for that, you're punishing compassion. And that says more about this court than it does about her. The silence that followed was profound. Judge Harrington studied Catherine for a long moment, then looked at the papers in front of him, then at the people assembled in his courtroom. Finally, he spoke. I'm going to take a recess. I need to consider what I've heard today. Court will reconvene in 1 hour. The hour that followed was agony. They waited in a small room adjacent to the courtroom, Levi pacing, Naira sitting with Samuel in her lap, Eleanor reviewing her notes and trying to gauge which way the judge would lean. Silas sat quietly, his broken leg propped up, his face thoughtful. "Whatever happens," Silas said finally, "you've made your stand. You've shown this community who you are. That matters." When they were called back in, the courtroom was even more packed than before, word having spread about Catherine's dramatic appearance. Judge Harrington sat at his bench, his face grave and unreadable. "I've considered the evidence presented today," he said. "This court's primary concern is the welfare of the minor child, Samuel Brennan. The question before me is whether that welfare is best served by leaving him in his father's care or by temporary placement elsewhere." He paused, letting the tension build. "Mr. Langley has presented concerns about Mr. Brennan's judgment and emotional stability. These concerns are not without foundation. The speed of his remarriage is unusual. The circumstances are unconventional. However, unconventional does not necessarily mean unfit." Levi held his breath. "The testimony I've heard today from multiple witnesses paints a picture of a household that is functioning well. A child who is demonstrably happier and healthier than he was before Mrs. Brennan's arrival. A family that, while formed quickly, appears to have genuine bonds of affection and commitment." Judge Harrington looked directly at Marcus. "Furthermore, I'm troubled by the timing and motivation behind this petition. Mr. Dalton's long-standing interest in acquiring Mr. Brennan's property is a matter of public record. While I don't doubt Mr. Dalton believes he would provide adequate care for Samuel, I must question whether the child's welfare is truly his primary concern or merely a convenient excuse to pursue other goals." Marcus's face went red with anger, but he remained silent. The judge continued, "As for the allegations regarding Mrs. Brennan and Miss Whitmore herself has testified that she acted of her own free will and that Mrs. Brennan's only crime, if it can be called such, was compassion. I see no basis for criminal charges and find the entire matter to be irrelevant to the custody question before me." He looked at Samuel, who was clutching Naira's hand. "That child has already lost one mother. He's clearly bonded with Mrs. Brennan. To remove him from her care would cause trauma that could not be justified by the speculative concerns raised by the petitioner." Levi's heart began to pound with hope. "Therefore," Judge Harrington said, "I find that Samuel Brennan is not at risk in his current home environment. The petition for custody review is denied. Samuel will remain in the care of his father and stepmother. This court is adjourned." The gavel came down with finality. For a moment, no one moved. Then Naira let out a sob of relief, pulling Samuel close. Levi crossed to them, wrapped his arms around both, felt the weight of fear lift from his shoulders. They'd won. Against the odds, against Marcus Dalton's money and influence, against prejudice and suspicion, they'd won. Eleanor was smiling, packing up her papers. Silas was being congratulated by Deputy Miller and Mrs. Henderson. Catherine Whitmore approached Naira, and the two women embraced, years of shared struggle acknowledged in that gesture. Marcus Dalton stormed out of the courtroom, his face thunderous, his lawyer trailing behind him. As he passed Levi, he leaned close and whispered, "This isn't over." But Levi, holding his family, felt invincible. "Yes, it is." They rode home as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and crimson. Samuel rode with Naira, chattering excitedly about everything that had happened, his fear transformed into the resilient optimism of children who've been shown they're loved and safe. When they reached the ranch, Levi helped Silas down from his horse, got him settled inside. Then he took Naira's hand and led her out to the old wooden bridge. The bridge he'd repaired, strengthened, made safe. "When I fixed this bridge," he said, "I kept thinking about what it meant. How sometimes the things we break through fear or neglect can be rebuilt. How we can cross from one life to another if we're brave enough." Naira looked up at him, the sunset catching in her dark eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that I meant what I said in court. I love you. I know we started this marriage for practical reasons, but somewhere along the way it became real. You became real to me, not just a solution to a problem, but a person I want to spend my life with." "I love you too," she whispered. "I didn't expect to. I thought I was too broken, that I'd lost too much to ever open my heart again. But you and Samuel, you made me believe in second chances." They kissed there on the bridge, the repaired bridge, the symbol of everything they had overcome and everything they were building. Behind them, Samuel whooped with joy, sensing the shift, understanding in the way children do that his family was becoming permanent, that the fear of loss was finally receding. That evening, they sat on the porch as the stars emerged, the three of them plus Silas, who'd become as much family as anyone. They talked about the future, about plans for expanding the ranch, about the garden Naira wanted to plant in spring, about whether Samuel might have a brother or sister someday. Marcus won't stop, Silas warned gently. Men like him don't give up just because they lose once. Let him try, Levi said. We'll be ready. 2 days later, their vigilance proved justified. Levi woke in the night to the smell of smoke. He was out of bed and running before he was fully awake, Naira right behind him. The barn was on fire, flames licking up the wooden walls, spreading fast in the dry October air. Get Samuel, Levi shouted. Get him out of the house. Naira ran back inside while Levi sprinted for the barn. The horses were screaming, panicked by the fire and smoke. He got the barn doors open, started leading animals out one by one, choking on the smoke, feeling the heat sear his lungs. Naira reappeared with Samuel wrapped in a blanket, Silas hobbling behind them on his crutches. She handed the boy to Silas, then ran to help Levi. Together they got the last horse out just before a section of roof collapsed. They stood in the yard, coughing and gasping, watching the barn burn. There was no way to save it, no way to stop the fire. All they could do was make sure it didn't spread to the house. As dawn broke and the fire finally died to embers, Deputy Miller arrived with 2 other men. He took one look at the scene and shook his head grimly. This wasn't an accident, he said. See here? He pointed to multiple spots around the barn's perimeter. Fire started in several places at once. Someone set this deliberately. Marcus, Levi said flatly. Can't prove it, Miller said, but I can arrest the man who did it for him. We caught one of Dalton's ranch hands trying to leave town in a hurry. He had smoke on his clothes and a pouch full of money. Under questioning, he admitted Dalton paid him to set the fire. Will that be enough to charge Marcus? Should be. I've already sent word to the territorial marshal. Arson and conspiracy. Marcus Dalton is going to jail. And he did. Within a week, Marcus was arrested and taken to Santa Fe to await trial. His empire, built on intimidation and dirty dealings, began to crumble as people who'd been afraid of him finally came forward with their own stories of his crimes. The community, perhaps shamed by how they treated Naira and Levi, rallied to help rebuild the barn. People who'd avoided them before came with lumber and nails and labor. Even some who still harbored prejudice against Apache people worked alongside Naira, saw her competence and kindness, started to question their assumptions. Winter came, gentle by high desert standards. Naira's belly began to swell with new life. A child conceived in those early days when their marriage was still finding its footing. Samuel was overjoyed at the prospect of becoming a big brother, the role he'd been denied when Emily's second baby died. On a clear day in late December, Levi took Naira and Samuel out to the bridge. He'd made a small wooden plaque carved with careful letters. Redstone Bridge, built 1865 by Thomas Brennan, repaired 1885 by Levi Brennan, for those who need to cross from fear to hope. He nailed it to the bridge post, stepped back to admire his work. Samuel read the words aloud, sounding them out carefully. What does it mean, Pa? It means that sometimes the things we're afraid of are actually the path to what we need most. Your Mama Emily was afraid of this bridge, and I let that fear guide my decisions. But when Mama Naira came, we had to face that fear together. And crossing it, fixing it, making it strong again, that's what saved us. I'm going to tell my brother or sister about this bridge, Samuel declared, when they're old enough to understand. Naira rested her hand on her belly, felt the flutter of life inside her. We'll tell them together. We'll tell them about how family can be built from broken pieces, how love doesn't always look the way you expect it to, how second chances are real if you're brave enough to reach for them. They walked back to the ranch as the winter sun painted everything in shades of gold. The new barn stood strong where the old one had burned. Smoke rose from the chimney of the house, promising warmth inside. The land spread out around them, harsh and beautiful, demanding and giving in equal measure. Levi looked at his wife, his son, the life they built from sorrow and necessity and unexpected grace. He thought about Emily, hoped she would approve. believed she would. He thought about all the bridges he'd been afraid to cross, all the fears that had kept him small and safe, and ultimately alone. Then he took Naira's hand, Samuel's hand, and they walked home together under the vast desert sky.